Today's guest on a Life and a Living podcast is Andy Salmon. Now, Andy is an extraordinary individual. He's had an amazing career in the Royal Marines, getting to the very top of his profession, and has had the most extraordinary experience, as I would say, in all of the, which I mentioned in the interview, in all the hotspots of the likes of Northern Ireland, Falklands, Iraq and Basra and places like that. And he's done extraordinary work. And his last role was in Basra as a Commandant General. So, really has had an extraordinary career. But since he's finished in the Marines, he's brought what he's learned, and he's learned an extraordinary amount in terms of leadership and how you lead in crisis situations. And God knows he's been exposed to many. But he does talk a lot about how you actually, develop yourself, how you develop your own leadership skills, how you behave, how you prepare yourself mentally, physically, and emotionally for those moments, and also how you actually do that with your teams. He also has got an extraordinary project that he's working on, we call Journey Through Conflict, where he is bringing what he has seen and used. He's got a fantastic story about how they used the combination of music, art, and culture, in Iraq to really help broker peace. So it's a fantastic story that you really got to listen to it. But also how he's bringing together all of those to really help people experientially to kind of grow and develop and create the lives that they really, really aspire to. This is an amazing story for an amazing man. And he's been highly decorated, and he's very humble. I won't talk about it, but he has been, trust me, highly decorated for the work that he has done during his career. And he's also a great communicator. So please sit back and listen to that. If you want to get other interviews, there's some great people that we interviewed, like Andy, on our podcast. You can go to the website, www.johnmurphyinternational.com. But in the meantime, sit back and really immerse yourself in this conversation with Andy Salmon. Andy, thank you so much indeed for joining us today on A Life and a Living. It's a real honor to have you here.
Thank you so much. Great to see you.
Yes.
In the south of France, I understand.
Yes, well, there are worse places to be, so I'm not looking for a sympathy vote when it comes to that, I can tell you. But you've had an amazing career before you've been doing the current work. You're 36 years in the Royal Marines to a very high level of Commandant General. You've done all of what I would call the hotspots of Northern Ireland and the Falklands and Iraq. And I think your last role was Commanding General in Basra. Was that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
So a fantastic career. And you've also, which was a great honor for us, it doesn't happen very often, you have an OBE. So we're very honored indeed to have an OBE. That doesn't happen to us every week here in A Life and a Living. So we're very honored to have that. Maybe just tell a little bit of background just quickly on the career, but also on the OBE, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Well, actually, these things are, what do they call OBEs? Other buggers' efforts. So it's not about what you do. It's basically about what everybody else does. And I remember a fine mentor from my very early days in Northern Ireland got me into his office in Crossmaglen it was, and we'd had a bit of a tour there. And he said to me, you're not going to get a medal. You don't need one. Medals are like confetti, Andy. They fall on some and not on others. So...
was he managing expectation, was he?
So managing expectation, I never got any.
Yeah.
But no, eventually, I suppose you do, and it's always for other people's efforts, actually. And so it's just a recognition of what they've done. You feel obviously good yourself about it, and that it's a story. It's the story that lies behind the medals, which are actually more interesting than whatever you call it.
Okay. Well, briefly, what are the stories behind the medals so that people can put that in context?
Oh wow! Well, most of them are for the campaigning and the conflict zones and the various situations you find yourself in as a Royal Marine in a long career. So, I mean that other buggers' efforts
Yeah.
was for the work that I was doing with a whole lot of people when I was Director Balkans. We had a huge amount of stuff going on. One of the things that we used to do was bring war criminals to justice and take them to The Hague. So that was one aspect. Another aspect was helping to nip a civil war in the bud in Macedonia in 2001. Another one was reshaping the whole of the sort of international military presence in the Balkans, partly because of the decision to think about going to war in Iraq, and also helping to plan all of that thing. So that it was just one of those crazy times, another crazy moment after, amongst a load of crazy moments after 9/11, basically.
Yeah.
So
Extraordinary work. But I mean, if I can bring you kind of closer up in terms of since you've left the Marines, and you were doing a lot of work with leadership, and obviously with the experience that you had and the roles that you had in the Royal Marines. I mean, clearly you got to develop your own individual leadership skills, but you're now bringing that out into a wider world. And one of the things I know you spend a lot of time, and I can understand with your background, is helping leaders and teams to really how they manage through crisis. And and crisis comes in all different shapes and sizes, and and we have one right now at the moment that is kind of a new one for everybody. But when you look at that and you're looking at leaders and you're looking at teams, what are the things that they need to do differently to what they've been doing before, both as a leader, and then how do they get the team to behave in a different way?
Well, that's a really deep question there, John.
Well, we start off with the easy ones. They get tougher.
Yeah. Thanks, mate. Put me on the spot. Well, it's very varied, the answer to that, because it partly depends on the context, the scenario, the crisis, the nature of it, what's happening, how it's affecting people, and whether you're in a high-performance organization or not. For example, if you're in an organization which is always adapting, transforming, learning as you're going along, very energized, very clear, has got all the hallmarks of a learning organization, then you are not going to be as affected by the crisis as you are if the converse was true. So I think part of what you have to do as leaders and teams in crises is, obviously, depending on the nature of the crisis, is understand and deal with it straight away. So get on top of it, get in control of it, and then depending on the nature of the crisis and what your relationship is with that crisis and how it affects your business or your clients or your activities or your people, then you have to get a very simple plan together. That's the first thing. How to get a simple strategy together, and it's sometimes very straightforward. Where do we want to go? Where are we now, and how are we going to get there in its simplest form? So you start by that. But what I found is common to a lot of the crises that I've been involved in, the conflicts, disasters, humanitarian situations, not just war and combat, is the essence of being able to deal with the fight, flight, or freeze response to fear and anxiety. So I think that is the fundamental tenet of successful crisis management and dealing with uncertainty, volatility, chaos, ambiguity.
And how do you? I agree with you, but that's not a natural skill necessarily. I mean, there's some people that might adopt to it more easily than others. But in that, how do you train and coach a leader to actually embrace that and to make sure they do that? Because it's all very well knowing it in theory, but it's like every plan doesn't survive the first punch. And so how do you make sure that they actually embrace that and then they actually engage with it and continue on doing it?
Yeah, well, in its basic form is learning the art of breathing. That's how it starts. So being able to, the old wives' tale, oh, crikey, feeling a bit anxious, John, take a few deep breaths. I mean, that's what my nan used to tell me that, as a kid,
Yeah.
So take a few deep breaths. So that's where it starts. So understanding breath and how to calm yourself down. Now, that in itself is the start of the process, because depending on a variety of things, like your maladaptive schema that you picked up as a kid, that you've either got on top of or you haven't, the ability to control your emotions, to choose your emotional response. So you dictate what you do and you choose how you respond to scenarios. So it's whether you want to do that, A, and B, whether you know how to do that. So I end up doing quite a lot of fundamental work with leaders and teams, and on some of the one-to-one engagements I do, I will spend a lot of time breathing to enable the people I'm working with to be calm, to get into the right zone, to be able to free their mind, to then imaginate, visualize, think about a scenario they want to get to, and or the tools that you need to use straight away to start to gain control. And these can be really varied, from learning how to sing a song properly to calm yourself down, or they can be, we're going to actually engage perhaps curiosity, or I'm interest. I'm really curious to understand why you'd want to respond like that, or I'm really interested to know whether there's an alternative response. So in any case, we know that unless you fill sometimes the void after you breathe to calm yourself down, to deal with the fundamental fear and anxiety attack, which causes fight, flight, and freeze. Unless you fill it with the right pattern, template, either learned or not, because it could be within you. It's a fundamental human, ancient limbic reptilian brain response that, is programmed within every single human being and animal. So we have to somehow take that moment to fill it with something else. Now, as a soldier who's been trained, when you come under fire, dash down, crawl, sights, observe, fire. Group range indication type of fire. Clear, loud as an order with pauses. All of those things that you learn in training are drills that you practice over and over again, which can save your lives. Yeah. Cock, hook, and look when a weapon jams. Cock, hook, and look. Cock back the weapon. Hook the working parts open. Look inside, clear the stoppage. Okay, that saves people's lives in combat when your weapon jams. Right. Well, if you haven't been trained to have any of these responses or to deal with it with practice behavior, the same goes for a tennis player. When they're sort of trying to control an emotion in a very difficult match, got to focus, and they've learned something to help to deal with the mind issue.
And how do you bring that? Because
does that make sense?
Oh no, it does. Absolutely makes sense, and I get that completely.
Answer.
No, and I get that because it's a really good answer, because being honest, it wasn't the answer I was expecting, but it's a very, very good answer, and I get it completely, and I would agree with you. I suppose what's going through my mind when you were talking about that, okay, that's me getting in control of myself as an individual, but then I'm leading a team of people.
Yeah.
So how do I get them to do it? Because if I'm blissfully calm and zen,
by doing it.
Just by doing it. So they do it by observing you?
Yeah. So if I'm working with a team, quite often the first bit of the whole workshop, we'll stand up and we'll do 10 minutes of breathing.
Right.
Yeah. get everybody calmed down in the mood, or play some nice music.
Right. And when they're actually working in the field, so okay, say if I'm running a team and I've got a group of people out, different countries, wherever they might be, if there's space, if it's a global organization, how do I convey that skill and that ability to them so that they can use it in their environment?
Yeah. So first of all, I just love people doing things straight away. Then say, how are you feeling? Have you noticed any difference? No, that was a bloody waste of time, Right, try again, try something different. No, honestly, so there's nothing like putting people in the situation and getting people to do stuff.
Right.
Then they see for themselves, they learn from themselves, they feel something different. So that's number one. Number two is obviously explain the science behind it. Right. So if people understand why it's so important to be able to do this, they understand the rationale, then they're going to accept or not accept. They've got a choice to make. They're going to accept doing it. So I think you've got to show people how the brain works. What do we do which causes fight, flight, or freeze? What are the responses and what are the solutions to that? What's the antidote to dealing with it? And when you sort of do those combinations of immersion by experiencing, so the experiential learning is what I prefer. I don't particularly like to tell people what to do or lecture. I prefer to do it with people. It's almost when you're rugby coaching or something like that, you call it game sense coaching.
Yeah.
You watch a group of kids or a team play some rugby and, you soon see what's working and what's not working. You can do that for 5 minutes. At the end of that 5 minutes, you say, okay, what are the things that you're observing when you play? Oh, I don't know. We've never observed when you play. So, okay, what are the things that you think you're doing well then? Blah, blah, blah. What do you think are the things we're doing a little bit of work on, which is still essential to our daily bread and butter life? And you say, okay, there's 3 things here. Let's just work on that one then.
Yeah.
And you get everybody to practice great stuff with that. You get somebody to demonstrate how to do it well. I mean, you can just do that like that.
Yeah. When
actually we're training armies in the jungle, that's what you're doing.
Yeah. They're experiencing.
You're taking them into a scenario and you're teaching existentially.
Yeah.
What that means, you're going on an exploratory, experiential journey to learn stuff, and you come out at the other end of that, you learn a shed load of stuff, far better than sitting in a classroom.
That's for sure.
And just being like a dummy at the end of the guy. You switched off after 3 minutes if he's boring.
Because also what you're saying just reminded me that at the end of the day, then the individuals have got the responsibility to actually accept it or take it on and embrace it. Because, like everything else, you can't make somebody else to do something. They've actually got to decide, make the decision to take it on board, which is that individual responsibility. Can I just shift gear a little bit? Because I want to talk about something that I know is very close to your heart, and that's the work you're doing through Journey Through Conflict. Yeah. And one of the things that you say was that in Iraq, that you saw how kind of combining music, art, and culture along with stories really helped you to find peace. Now, I've looked at what you're doing on your website, Journey Through Conflict, which is phenomenal. And I want to talk a bit more about that. But you might just talk a little bit about the background to it, but also how that combination of factors really helped to broker peace, which is not something that you would necessarily associate with kind of combining music, art, and culture.
Yeah. Long story short then.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've always loved music. I've always loved the performing arts. I've always loved arts and culture and film and TV and documentary as a medium to educate, enlighten, catalyze change. So I'd always had that sort of embrace that through education and, because I love playing music and stuff. In Iraq, in Basra, in particular, between 2008 and 2009, we had adopted a campaign based on optimism, optimism that the future was going to be a better place than the place that you're in now. And that we needed to shape, build and protect it. We needed to support and influence Iraqis to build a better Iraq for themselves and look through the lens of the people and not through the lens of enemies. So automatically you start to think about, well, how do you shift people's minds? in a very positive way. And one of the things that about Basra, and I connected and reached out with my opposite number too, from the Foreign Office, who's the sort of consul general in Basra, an ambassadorial figure. And we hadn't been reaching out like that before in the same deliberate way, but connecting to lots of different types of people. So listen to people, connect with them, or connect first, actually, listen to people, and then understand how you can help them build a better future for themselves, go on a journey. And now in Basra, it being the centre of culture and poetry, has been quite a cosmopolitan place, actually. It was called the Venice of the Gulf. So they'd always had this cultural DNA heavily in them, singing music and mixing things. And, you know, the group of people that I was working with and discussing these things about how we could bring back this feeling of connectedness and what unifies people rather than divides people through culture, stories, music, art, and so forth. And we were sort of thinking about how do we start this? And I had a lot of these conversations with multi-faith leaders, members of the community, both Sunni and Shia, of all types, great people, as part of this connecting with everybody, reaching out to them. And we thought, well, how are we going to do this? Where are we going to start? And it was Christmas of 2008. And the Royal Marines Band came over to Basra. I'd invited them over. I managed to get a plane to fly them over on. And we smuggled them in armoured trucks called Mastiffs. We smuggled the whole of the band into the centre of Basra, into the city. And we held this concert in this Chaldean church with a great friend of mine called Father Al-Banna, who is the kind of bishop type figure of the Chaldean church in the city of Basra. And we had this concert with carols in Aramaic,
Wow.
carols from the 11th and 12th centuries never heard before. Amazing music, and you just can't believe the impact. I mean, it was just so energizing and inspirational and emotional as hell. Mm-hmm. And of course, you know, the young women and men in the band who were really affected by this, and the connection we had with the young teenagers and everybody else in the congregation who listened. It was like an outpouring of grief and emotion, and stories immediately flooding out of the kidnapping, the murders, the persecution that this particular community has suffered. I mean, there were lots of other communities in other faiths that were suffering likewise. And you suddenly realise, crikey, what you're doing. And this was sort of replicated so many times with music. And also, we'd had an artist come over called Xavier Pick, as a Lebanese guy, and he ended up staying for a long time, painting everything about the campaign that was going on. And we turned the headquarters into an art gallery, for example, and we just saw different conversations happening. So what we were doing was we were enabling people, actually, do you know what it is? Coming back to our earlier conversation, it's like the equivalent of the breath to deal with fight, flight, or fear. It's the equivalent of the breath to get rid of fear and anxiety, and to calm down and let what's within you and the spirit infuse the conversation. It transcends when you apply music, story, and art together. It transcends normal three-dimensional conversations or body experiences, I kid you not. You feel and you see different things when you combine the lot. What that effect enabled us to do was to see glimpses of peace, to see different conversations about peace and reconciliation, different aspirations, different hopes, to have those conversations with other people that you may not have wanted to have a conversation with, that could even be an enemy.
That's,
I've
I mean,
seen that
that's,
impact several
yeah,
times.
it's an incredible story. I mean, and you know, and as you explain it, you know, you can see it, you can visualize, but it must have been absolutely transformative in that time and at that moment. And you know, I'm assuming it was a catalyst for kind of going on, having some conversations that you really needed to have.
It was a catalyst for so many things. I kind of really hadn't. Honestly, this was an exploration. It was an experiment.
Yeah, yeah,
I
but I
mean,
mean,
you know,
you've continued with Journey Through Conflict, haven't you? I mean,
yeah,
I looked at
yeah,
your website. I was looking at it this morning, and I have to say, and I just saw a few short clips. Well, one short clip, I didn't catch the lad's name, but it was at some, I think it was at a church. The video was, and this lad, and his two legs have been blown off, an arm. So and
yeah.
he's talking. What sorry, pardon me, but it absolutely blew me away was the fact that he was talking about being grateful, right? And you're looking at this young man, right, who, you know, his injuries are, to say, you know, life changing is an understatement, right? And he's standing there in front of everyone talking about being grateful. And that, I just found that was so profound. And this is part of the work that you're doing with Journey Through Conflict, isn't it?
It is part of it. Yeah, because the rationale that lies behind Journey Through Conflict. I mean, this hasn't been planned, by the way. It was very serendipitous and synergistic, synchronized work. We ended up by creating a production called Journey Through Conflict based on the experiences of 3 different campaigns in Iraq. That was kind of my own story, but, you know, then we put music to it, suffused music to it. We brought a Kurdish singer who'd been a Peshmerga guerrilla fighter. We brought an Islamic cleric to do a call to prayer at the beginning. We performed this thing in sacred places, had quite a staggering impact on people. The one that you saw was called From Then Until Now, and it was about the stories of veterans through 100 years of conflict, based on the centenary anniversary of the end of the war. And what I didn't want to do was just have an anniversary about the end of the First World War. I wanted to say that war was fought 100 years ago, but by the way, nothing's changed in this world as you go through conflict. And we're going to hear why that is the case through veterans. Didn't obviously have a veteran from the First World War because, you know, once Harry Patcher died, that was it. But we had veterans from every other. So I had a 96-year-old special operations Wren from the Second World War talking about her experiences. And the person you saw on the video was John White, triple amputee, blown up in his second tour in Afghanistan. And what you realise is when you go into these conflict zones, humanitarian disaster areas like the Kurdish crisis in 91 or the Syrian refugee crisis, that comes back to what we said at the beginning, which is we all have a choice to make. We can choose, if we want to go on a journey through conflict and out the other side to a better place. Now, sometimes we just need help to make that choice. We can't do it by ourselves. It's just too traumatic. It's just too impossible. So we need to come together to make that choice. So the From Then Until Now production was about the steps that an individual has to go through a journey through conflict to release your soul at the other end. The journey through conflict for John White, he'd gone through all of these different steps, but he epitomized, which is why it's sort of, we end up with him on the video actually. He epitomized what all of this is about. To finally be released, to accept the condition that you're in, to embrace the goodness of the world and the love that exists, and just be free
And grateful.
as a soul to do it.
Yeah, and I mean, I thought the way he spoke about gratitude was just unbelievable. Yeah, absolutely. But I know that, what I understand, that your mission, Andy, is really kind of the combination of music, art, and culture to produce those kind of immersive experiences for people to actually get to a better life. Where are you on that journey?
Exciting stuff. Well, COVID has been the great accelerator.
Yes. for lots of things. Yeah.
Yeah, well, actually, what it's done is basically we've created what's called Salmon House Arts, and it's all about inspiring journeys to a better life. And we fuse story with music, art, and culture, and apply that approach to varying scenarios to co-create, catalyze, enable inspiring journeys to a better life. And it's in several different domains. So one domain is the art of leadership. So right now it's about leading through crisis. So I'm trying to help people lead through crisis with other people involved in that process. There's another little show that we've created called The General and the Maestro, and that's with Tom Donald, who's this jazz classical concert pianist, just a stunning improviser. And so we've done this show virtually. We launched it actually a couple of years ago, but we still had a production to do, and an album to launch as well, so we didn't quite finish it off. So The General and Maestro is basically stories and improvised music, and it can be applied to different scenarios. So, for example, improvisation to accelerate creativity and innovation in the business space or with teams. At the moment, we've just done 2 virtual shows called Stories for COVID, very short 15-minute virtual things that we just put out there with some American audiences, which seem to have worked quite well. And then there's the journey through conflict stuff, which is kind of like the full multi-sensory experience of going on these journeys. So, for example, it could be modern slavery. It could be, and these are all requests, by the way, that have come in. So I'm not just inventing scenarios. It's people who've requested us to work with them. The victims of Boko Haram in Nigeria, and the Islamic NGO got in touch and said, can you do something with that? A country, the Cameroons, bringing the North Cameroons, South Cameroons people together to create a different narrative for hope. So those kind of scenarios. So those are the chunks. And basically, it's a really flexible house. You go in the house, it's full of other people's stories, not just my story. I don't want it to be about me. It's about other people's stories. It's about catalyzing other people to go on inspiring journeys to a better life. So you're going to immerse in that world. The website's being built. You immerse in the world of this. And, if you want to go on a journey of whatever sort, as a leader or team, there's animation and music and film involved in all of these things. It's basically trying to get people into a completely different space, the multi-sensory experience, to transcend the normal experience, to really find the solution, to make a difference to the world, to make the world a cleaner and better place.
Fantastic work. I just love what you're doing. I love the way you're doing it, Andy, and I love the way you've brought your experience in the Royal Marines and everything around that and brought into what you're doing today. And it's so powerful. Before we wrap up, and you could say where people can get in touch with you, 2 questions: a book that has had an impact upon you, what it is and why.
Well, I think the book is called Awareness by De Mello.
Yes,
who's a Jesuit pastor. Fantastic. You probably might be familiar with him, John.
Yeah, I love his stuff.
Yeah, and I think that his work, which predates a lot of the neuroscience, which actually just sort of really underpins what he was saying, I think was really powerful. It's a very short book, but you feel your life changing as you read it.
Yeah, it is one of those extraordinary books, isn't it, Andy, that you just go back to every now and again, and you find something different in it, which I think is extraordinary.
Yeah, and that's because we start to become more aware and mindful of our existence.
That's true, and I think also you come back to it and you're in a different place when you're reading it. So I think it resonates somewhat differently. Yeah. Second question is daily rituals. I'm sure with a man with your background that you must have some that you haven't completely discarded for your 36 years.
Well, obviously the early morning, how's your father?
Right.
And I read a spiritual piece on that. I'm reading What My Soul Told Me at the moment by Richard Barrett. What My Soul Taught Me, rather. Told What My Soul Told Me. I finished Jordan Peterson's book on the antidote to chaos. So I kind of sounds like I spend ages on there. It's very unpopular for the rest of the family. But anyway, so I come out of that, and then I go into can be up to half an hour of body conditioning and breathing to prepare myself for the day. Sometimes after that, depending on what I've got on, but sometimes I'll then go into what I call free writing. So it's a sort of like a mindfulness technique. So I close my eyes, have my book open. I'm in quite a calm state because I've asked God, prayed to the universe, prayed to God, shown gratitude, and I request things, to fulfill my intention, and ask for guidance to release my soul. And then I'll free write after that process in my book, which basically close your eyes, really try and free your mind and allow the pen to just start on the piece of paper. That's my morning routine.
Fantastic. That's really, really powerful. Andy, it's been a real pleasure and an honor to have you here. I must say, I'm absolutely thrilled that you came along. Where can people get in touch with you?
Well, Andy at andysalmon.co, just .co, Andy at andysalmon.co, and www.journeythroughconflict.org. Go into the website, there's a phone number on there, or you can mail us, join our mailing list, whatever.
Great.
So that's how to get hold of us.
Great. Andy, thank you so much. It really has been fantastic. I love the story. I love the work you're doing. I wish you continued success with it. I've no doubt there's going to be a lot more joyful experiences for you and for all the people you come in contact with. Congratulations on your work, and thanks for being a great guest.
John, thanks very much indeed, and thank you for inviting us to share all of these thoughts with you.
Thank you.
Yeah.